I am live. Guess I might be going live on there in a minute as well. Hey guys, it's Friday, and it has been quite a long time actually since I have done a Friday live / recorded a podcast episode / actually had my face visible in real time. It's been a bit of a month actually. It's been a bit of a 5 or 6 weeks, but I decided that I probably needed to get myself out there. Planned on doing this at 11 o'clock this morning. It's currently now 5:20, and that's kind of how my day has gone. And that's sort of how my last 6 weeks have gone, really. So Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees has been super busy. So we've done the Isle of Wight conference, and I'm going to talk about the Isle of Wight conference in a minute and the huge success that was, but also the journey it was to get there. But it's also been a really full-on couple of weeks from a personal perspective, and kind of getting my head around some kind of like parenting things and juggling life and middle age and kids moving away from home and kind of entering that next era of parenting, I guess. And I think when things change, often my own dyslexia kind of really kicks in, and I have to dig deep into my own strategies and really dig deep and think about how to manage my own dyslexia. And quite often I have noticed that I do kind of like retreat. It's just been head down, go, go, go. But yes, all is good in my world. It's just been busy. So let's talk about the Isle of Wight conference then. The Isle of Wight conference was on the 13th of November. And I will actually share my keynote talk at some point when I feel brave enough. But I explain the conference as its own character in a Thomas Hardy novel, because it really did feel like it was fated to be a disaster from the very, very, very beginning. But it wasn't. It was absolutely incredible, and the feedback was brilliant. And actually, I'm going to read some of the feedback to you, share some of the feedback from the conference with you. But it was really interesting because I did nearly cancel it at one point. And the reason why I didn't cancel it was actually because of a letter that my son wrote me before he went to Australia. So he has gone back to Australia with a view to setting up his life there. And he wrote me a letter that had lots of things in it that I won't share. But one of the things that he did write, and the thing that he wanted me to really remember, was that for him, dyslexia has never been about what he can't do. It's always been about what he can do. And it's always been about finding his strengths. And he really recognizes that. And all of my kids have kind of built their life or are building their lives on their strengths. But for him in particular, it was really key. I would say his dyslexia impacted his education the most. And just as I was about to cancel this conference a couple of weeks kind of before, he left and he wrote me this letter. And I realized that I was looking at the conference all wrong. So rather than focusing on the seats I had sold, I was focusing on the empty seats and all the missed opportunities. And his little letter, I love it when somebody watches because then I feel like I'm talking to somebody. His letter basically made me realize that I was focusing on the wrong things. I needed to focus on the fact that I did have 55 people coming to that conference, 55 bums on seats. And that was 55 people that I was going to be able to support, and were going to have ripples kind of from the day. And it turned out to be an absolutely incredible event. So let me talk you through the day and what happened on that day. So the day kicked off with me doing a keynote all about parenting dyslexic, so dyslexic parents' perspective. That was my keynote. And then Georgina Durrant joined us virtually because it was too far for her to come in the middle of the week. But she joined us virtually to talk about send strategy. So she did a 45-minute session on Zoom. We then had a little break. Hi, Chris Scora. And then we were joined by the brilliant Fintan O'Regan, who came to talk about the curious case of ADHD. And if you've ever met Finton, you'll know that he is very entertaining. But his talk was absolutely brilliant. We then finished off the morning with a roundtable discussion. And I always think that a roundtable discussion is really, really powerful. And particularly because there's such, on the Isle of Wight, there's such great collaboration between schools when you can actually get Senkos out of school, which is difficult sometimes because of budgets and things, but they're always really willing to collaborate. So all of the speakers throughout the day and the exhibitors went and sat on a round table, and we had a discussion all around what the challenges were, but also kind of sharing good practice. Then we had a lovely networking lunch, and then after lunch we had really good fun with a raffle. So lots of companies had donated prizes, so we had a raffle, which was really good fun. And then Dr. Helen Ross talked to us about dysgraphia and what that looks like in the classroom and how to identify that, but also how really the term dysgraphia is quite an American term. We don't necessarily use it. We haven't necessarily got a working definition in the UK. We kind of not lump it all in with dyslexia, but we kind of often look at it. We look at writing and spelling as part of dyslexia anyway. That was a really interesting talk. And then Kat Edel, one of the co-founders of the Dyscalculia Network, finished the day with the most brilliant practical hands-on session where she got everybody making boxes and kind of using air dry clay and all sorts of stuff, inspiring us on how to make maths really, really fun. And then to literally finish off the day, tie it up in a neat little bow, all of the experts sat on a panel and we did a Q&A open the whole floor to a Q&A. Which was just brilliant. And even though I said I would never, ever, ever do another conference again, and I was like, this is like childbirth. I said to my team and to my husband, I said, this is not like childbirth when you say you're never going to do it again and then you forget the pain of it. I am never doing another one again. But I might do another one because these are the sorts of things that people wrote. I asked them to sum it up in 3 words, and I had things like informative, child-centered, adapting, inspiring, engaging, informative, fabulous, relaxing, welcoming, lots of learning, being creative, problem solving, thought-provoking. Loads of people said thought-provoking, which was just brilliant. Friendly, inclusive. What else have we got here? Inspiring, informative, thought-provoking again, worthwhile. Isn't that great to have on the end of a training day that it's been worthwhile? Another great day. And then I did ask, one of the questions was, what would make the conference better kind of going forward? And there were things like, having handouts and stuff in advance, which is fine, but there was a budgetary kind of reason why I hadn't provided handouts in advance. But the one comment that did tip me over the edge was somebody put that there needed to be 2 a year. And I just thought, oh my goodness, I've just about managed to get my dyslexic head around 1 a year. I don't know if I could do 2 a year on the Isle of Wight, but it was really lovely to know that the impact that it's had. And the other thing that was really brilliant that made our conference a little bit different to normal was that firstly it was the kind of like the round tables and the real collaborative approach that we had, but secondly it was the fact that the speakers were there all day, and thirdly I've just been distracted by something that's just blown by the window and I can't remember what I was going to say now. Isn't that typical ADHD and getting distracted? What was I going to say? Why was my conference different? I actually really don't know what I was going to say. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So we videoed the speakers. So I had permission from the speakers and we videoed, and the idea was that, the idea is, and it has happened. The videos were then emailed out to the delegates for them to be able to filter the training back into their schools, because I really did want it to be the ripples that kept on rippling. And what was really brilliant was I had emails a week later from people saying, I still haven't received the videos. Are they coming? I just want to check I haven't missed them because I really want to filter this information out to my school. So I feel really confident that those 55 people spread across the Isle of Wight, and I think there were a couple of people from the mainland as well, have done a really good job at disseminating that information into schools. So it was a learning curve for sure. I didn't raise the sponsorship that I needed to raise, so I didn't end up paying myself. But I learned a lot about profit and loss. It was definitely an event that was worth doing because of the impact that it had. And that leads me on to kind of my own neurodivergent thinking, really, because one of the reasons why I think it had been such a battle was because, if I'm really honest, I think I had some old dyslexic neurodivergent beliefs in my head that I was struggling to shake. And I think that they were haunting me a little bit. And I think every time I got sort of excited, that self-doubt crept in a little bit. So for me, it was a real lesson in keeping that self-talk and that self-belief in check, so that it didn't impact what I actually did. But one of the things I realized afterwards, again, when I think back to kind of Bill's letter and focusing on the can't, I think quite a classic neurodivergent trait, and feel free to comment if you're watching along and let me know if this does or doesn't resonate. But I think one of the classic neurodivergent traits is we have this image in our head of what we want something to look like. And when it doesn't look or it doesn't live up to our expectations, or we're thrown a bit of a curveball, it's not perfect. So therefore, because it's not how we envisaged it to be, it's very difficult to see it as being successful. And I think, again, it's those kind of that old kind of like expectation of when, you spend hours on something, you spend hours writing an essay and then you hand it in and it's not exactly like you've spent all of that effort, but it's just got red pen all over it. I think there's an element of my own neurodivergence coming up. And what it's really made me realize is kind of Bill's letter, that event, my own neurodivergences. So I got diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 34, and I've really recently got an ADHD diagnosis. All of my children have known from a really early age. So even if they haven't had a formal diagnosis, and they don't all have a formal diagnosis, they've always been supported in a very can-do way, in a very neuro-inclusive way, I guess, if you like. And they don't see it as a barrier because their mindset has not been shaped in that way, because I've supported them from a really early age that it doesn't get in their way. And for me, it's really interesting. So my eldest is in Australia at the moment. He's just doing an open university degree, and my middle one is at uni. And neither of them ticked the DSA box, and neither of them wanted to disclose their neurodivergence, which is really interesting. And when I said to them, you can actually access DSA, like you can access DSA, like I help people do this. They were like, but Mum, we don't feel like we need it. Like, we feel able to advocate for ourselves, and we feel like we know what we need to be successful. And at such a point, college won't give us that, or it becomes a barrier and we need something different, then we will apply for it and we'll look at it differently. But until that point, we're not going to worry about it, because we know what we need. And so often it's really interesting, like so often you hear kids say that they don't want to be different, or they feel like they just want their difference to be invisible. They're scared to advocate for themselves. But it's really interesting, I feel like, with my kids, because they've been just brought up in this really neuro-inclusive environment where it's just been really accepting, and it's been about, well, we play to your strengths. They don't even feel the need to disclose it. Like, it's really interesting. But I do actually want my middle daughter, so she's uni now, I do actually want her to do a revision workshop with me online at some point, because the way she approached revision, and I didn't help her, she just developed strategies herself, was just fantastic. She had so many strategies. So at some point, I definitely want to do a workshop with her. So yeah, so that's the conference and what's happening there. In terms of what's happening in my own dyslexic life then, so I'm continuing to chip away at my book, which is a guide for parents. I haven't managed to get to that much because of the conference recently, but I've really enjoyed getting back to this week and writing that, a guide for parents to navigate the education system. So that's been really exciting. I've been chipping away at that. And then my youngest is GCSE, she's year 11. So we've just had mocks. So there's been a bit of kind of like managing the expectations there. And what's been really brilliant is how supportive her school are being in the approach that they're taking, that actually it's about, you have to take all of these subjects, but it's about actually you making sure that you're kind of prioritizing the subjects that are important to you in order to take the next step. So there's a bit of, like I say, there's a lot at the minute of running business and parenting children at the same time with neurodivergence. So there's a lot of plate spinning, which is why I haven't been around a lot. But there are still a few weeks of 2025 left, and I have got lots left to do. So I thought I'm going to come on today and I'm going to do a live, going to download what's happened and try and get into more of a routine of kind of getting back to that podcast and talking about what dyslexia and ADHD looks like in everyday life. The other thing that has happened, so what has happened in the last 5 weeks? So son's gone to Australia. Mother-in-law's turned 80. I've done a conference that was absolutely incredible. Oh, that's the other thing that's happened. So talking about strengths and really fostering our kids' strengths and the things that they're really brilliant at. My youngest has been in 2 productions and she always blows me away. But she was Annie at the end of October, and actually myself and her dad, we were away. We watched her opening night, but we were away for the rest of the performances, and she's just got such good strategies to be able to cope. And she absolutely nailed that. And then last week her school did a production of Hadestown and she played a completely different character. She played Eurydice. And just showed her versatility. And my reason for kind of mentioning this is because so often dyslexic kids have a really negative experience at school, or even if it's not negative, school empties their self-esteem bucket. And actually, I always say to parents, my advice is, if I could give you one piece of advice, it's find the thing that your child is really good at and put them in the way of that thing, because that is how you're going to keep their confidence and their self-esteem bucket really, really high. But what is amazing is she had her moment last week where she almost like stood out, and the teachers could see, all of those subjects that she potentially struggles in, where she doesn't shine and, she's struggling to keep up. All of a sudden, they could see how when she could play to her strengths, how incredible she is. And I am going to say she's incredible because it was an incredible production, and she is so fortunate to go to the school that she goes to. But also what made it even more beautiful was it was a group of children, well, they're not children, they're young people between the age of 15 and 18, and they'd sort of all done shows together before in various combinations. And quite often in the musical theatre world, kids get sort of a bad rep, really, for kind of, psyching each other out, or it's really competitive. And what was really beautiful about this particular production and the ethos that the school had created was that you genuinely felt when you watched it that they were rooting for each other, and the support that they gave one another, you could almost see them kind of willing each other on. And what that actually did was that created like a platform for the next person to like shine even more. Like, it was just incredible to watch from that point of view. And it was such a high standard. I've watched way more youth theatre than any one person should watch, with 2 daughters that do musical theatre. And I can honestly say this was the best youth theatre production I have ever seen. It was incredible, and it is a memory that will stay with me forever for sure. Anyway, I'm going to disappear now because I don't think I've got anything else to say kind of related to dyslexia. But I hope that you all have a really good weekend, and I will be back to talk dyslexic life with Jo Rees soon.